Good evening and welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show here on Newsmax TV. You know, all this week, the Chris Salcedo Show presented a special series that we called The Big War with China. We provided a critical look at the communist nation. In my opinion, we met our goal of providing insight into China's menacing military buildup, their unfair trade practices, and human rights abuses. One question remains. Why hasn't our country, a nation of good and decent people, why have we not risen up to call for accountability from our own government that appears to be shrinking from their responsibility to protect us from the China threat? The answer is our final bit of analysis this week. China's helpers, the American press. That's the focus of tonight's preamble. Now, all this week, we detailed the depravity, inhumanity, and threat to human freedom posed by communist China. We hammered their overt racism against blacks. We denounced their enslavement of over 3 million people. We cursed them for intentionally spreading the China virus, causing the pandemic. But you know who hasn't been sounding the alarm on communist China and that threat? The biased press. Now, we know why. But instead of explaining it to you, I thought it would be more impactful to show you. Just yesterday, Joe Biden and his merry band of Marxist-Leninists announced sanctions on the nation that they view as a national emergency, Vladimir Putin's Russia. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood here. Putin's Russia is no friend of the United States. Still, on the threat scale, Russia is a 4, while China is a big 10. China is the bigger threat economically, militarily, and culturally. They are a government of murderous, racist, slaver communists, a government that stands in stark contrast to the American ideals of freedom, liberty, and prosperity. The emergency isn't Russia, a fact pointed out yesterday right here on the Chris Salcedo Show by former Director of National Intelligence, Rick Grinnell.
Of course. I mean, look, what Joe Biden did today was manipulate intelligence, and Avril Haines allowed him to do it. Russia is a problem. There's no question about it. But there is no crisis other than, you know, the typical Russia attitude towards Ukraine. Of course, that's always of an urgent matter. That's been going on for a very long time. And let's be honest, Crimea was grabbed under the Obama-Biden administration. So that has been created and been going on for a very long time. China is an actual crisis, and the intelligence will show you that. What they've been able to do with spies and with manipulation of intelligence, and to convince many Democrats to talk about Russia as the crisis, it's a look over their strategy.
In truth, Biden and his allies in the basket of biased press are merely continuing a fantasy that they started during the Trump administration. It was socialist Democrats and the dishonest press that pushed a narrative of Russia-Trump collusion in the 2016 presidential election. Socialists like Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, and Richard Blumenthal, among others, openly lied about evidence they claimed to have about collusion. A Trump campaign ad called them out on their lies.
Evidence is pretty clear that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
We saw strong evidence of collusion.
Well, we know there was collusion with people in the campaign.
I think a mountain of evidence of collusion between the campaign and the Russians.
But it wasn't just the socialist Democrats who were guilty of lying about Trump. Adopting Democrat lies and calling it news, the unfair press perpetuated the myth of Russia-Trump collusion with absolutely no evidence. Check out this montage from our pals over at Newsbusters.
Vladimir Putin was on stage left in Helsinki alongside the President of the United States, who had nothing but warm words for the time that they spent together.
First of all, I just have to say I'm sick to my stomach. I'm really feeling nauseous.
Stunned, gobsmacked.
We're hearing words like, I feel sick, this is frightening, calling it an abomination.
Shocking.
Stunning. Genuinely stunning.
What is going on? Unbelievable.
Astonishing. Just astonishing.
It is astonishing, it's heartbreaking, and it represents, I think, a pivotal turn in our nation's history.
It's time for Americans to be out on the street.
There are people protesting in the streets every day in the 70s. Why is that not happening now?
When do we see almost a shadow government come out and say, we cannot side with the government?
As an American citizen, I just
just personally think today is just an incredibly depressing moment in our time, in our history as an American.
For nearly 3 years, we heard baseless reporting and political invective mislabeled as news. The majority of the so-called press had undertaken this political vengeance, all for the hatred of President Trump and his pro-American policies. It's a matter of historic fact that Bob Mueller's special counsel investigation found no evidence of collusion, evidence the Democrats and the fake news media claim to have. But back to China. There we find everything that the left-wing press says they oppose. We find slavery, we find racism, we find totalitarian dictatorship. We find a government committed to denying human freedom. So let's show you the extensive journalism being done by the biased press to expose the threat to mankind that is posed by communist China. Oh, wait, we have no montage to show you, because the press has largely ignored the human rights abuses, the theft of intellectual property, the suppression of the free press, the biggest threat to the United States of America. The question is, why? My friends, it's no more complicated than this. The press hasn't been told by their political party, the Socialist Democrats, to care. What's worse, the press seems to be avoiding China to protect their pals in the Democrat Socialist Party. The Democrats have signaled that they wish to protect China, even after China threatened to withhold America's medicines at the height of the pandemic, even after China intentionally caused said pandemic, even though China supports slavery, racism, and is the largest CO2 emitter on the planet. The socialists seek to protect China. I have a list of the reasons as to why I think the left is committed to protecting that communist country. Number one, it's ideology. China's barbarism represents the pinnacle of liberal achievement, total control over a population by an elite few. Number two, China has made many of these leftists filthy rich. From the woke NBA to Major League Baseball to Google and other Silicon Valley companies. The left is making billions doing business with China. And all it costs them is the loss of freedom of millions of people around the globe. Number three, the Democrats are compromised. Dianne Feinstein had a communist spy driving her around for 2 decades. Eric Swalwell, who Democrats put on the House Intelligence Committee, was literally sleeping with the enemy, Fong Fong, another Chinese spy. Former DNI Rick Grinnell tells the Chris Salcedo Show many other socialist Democrats have been compromised by America's enemy. So why doesn't the biased press aggressively report on the threat of China? Because to do so would compromise their political pals. And the majority of the press values keeping socialist Democrats in power more than they value protecting the lives and freedom of the American people. This is just one of the myriad reasons why the majority of the press are not journalists. They are instead propagandists, not worthy of America's time or attention.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.